Good day. It's a real pleasure, though from a distance, to be able to give this presentation on spate irrigation on groundwater in Balochistan for this very important event. I regret I can't be there. My heart is still in Balochistan. My heart is still in Quetta, having worked there for many years ago, and worked particularly on groundwater and also on spate irrigation. There's definitely a crisis in Balochistan, there's no doubt about it. It's there to see. And all over the world, groundwater is getting more and more important. I would like to discuss this, and I would like to also make the link with one important solution area, which is the development of spate irrigation. Some key figures, what we see is that a lot of irrigation in the world is from groundwater, 43%, a lot of potable water, a lot of water from industry is all coming from groundwater. And this is not likely to change, unless we get crises such as in Balochistan. But we have new developments in pumping technologies. Supermarkets demand more and more uniform products. We have climate change. All these things make us depend on groundwater much more than ever before in human history. Now, this miracle that groundwater has brought, the development of groundwater, is reaching its limits globally all over the world. The amount of groundwater is used is 20% more than the replenishment, and this leads to things that we see in Balochistan: falling groundwater tables, compaction of aquifers. We can also get groundwater pollution, salinization. It depends on the area, but this is really a global problem, and I think Balochistan is in the forefront as one of the worst cases, and this is really something I personally regret a lot. The concerns have been there since 1980s. In the meantime, we had a growing population, growing agriculture, growing cities. We had warning signals. I've seen it myself after droughts in different periods. We saw already groundwater collapses here and there, not at the scale we see today. But there was never any effective action, and my hope is that this is not another event where we exchange thoughts and ideas, etc., but that we could come to some real action and real solutions, which there definitely are. Briefly, there's been bigger concern on groundwater. I was myself the leader of this shared vision on groundwater governance and this action plan for many big organizations such as the FAO, the World Bank. And this is what we think should be there. We should really take responsibility for groundwater. We should really have effective management and engage the stakeholders. We cannot regulate from a distance with groundwater. Knowledge which is there should be shared, should be adequate, and we should make a link with other processes, particularly land management. Basically, it's just what the shoe manufacturer Nike said: just do it. This is what we have to go to. Briefly, to show you that there are examples where groundwater is managed properly. This is from Andhra Pradesh. Intensive engagement of people in measuring their own groundwater resources in farmer water schools, understanding what is happening, and this has led to a reduce in overuse in all critical areas. Another example, Ethiopia. Ethiopia has done massive, it was a basket case of food insecurity or famine. It has invested massively in recharge measures throughout the landscape, not here and there. And now groundwater tables have come back and a new resource is created. And they're clever. They use everything to recharge groundwater, such as roads. We have thousands of kilometers of roads, and we should use them for groundwater recharge. Now, what I would like to focus on this presentation is whether spate irrigation can also contribute to groundwater management in Balochistan. I think it can very much. We can make use of this short-term flood. This is one of the major sources of water in Balochistan. So if we don't use it directly and use it for recharge, we miss a massive opportunity. Spate irrigation systems in Pakistan, all over the world, have a massive potential to perform better and to be expanded. And we're not using the full potential. And this would be a major contribution to food security, to the production of oil seeds, pulses, fodder. But also, in the right locations, not everywhere. We have to understand always the shallow hydrogeology. Spate irrigation can contribute significantly to the recharge of groundwater and to the subsurface flow. If we look at the dry river, it depends, from river to river, but often 30 to 60% of the flow in a dry river is subsurface flow. This is a massive resource, which we don't see, whether it is recharged by groundwater. Yeah. The extent and potential for spate irrigation. In Pakistan, we say this is one of the largest resources, but often we forget about it because it's not so visible as the perennial irrigation systems that we're having. But even in a bad year, and this was the year when it was an extensive report was done, 350,000 hectares is under spate irrigation. In good years, it can go up to 1.2, 1.4 million. And this figure, Balochistan is the largest area with spate irrigation in Pakistan. If you look at the yields, I think always a good indicator. In Pakistan, in spate irrigation, yields are much less than they are elsewhere in the world, in the countries where you have similar systems, such as North Africa, Yemen, etc. And we can make a lot of change by rationalizing the water distribution, by better moisture contribution, better management practice in land. We have better varieties than we are using now. We can use agroforestry, special value chain. So spate irrigation is being forgotten, but it can be a highly productive form of agriculture. And we should design for recharge. So we also should, now the investment is very much on the diversion, on the headworks, but it's the command area development and the agriculture development which really makes a difference in the livelihoods of people who depend on spate irrigation. Now, making the link with groundwater, there are two strategies. First, we can optimize the recharge from spate irrigation. We will give a number of examples. And secondly, we can do much better in developing groundwater resources in and around the dry riverbeds. Two examples I want to give in particular are sand dams and subsurface dams. How do we optimize recharge from spate flows? Basically, we need to understand how this works. The recharge in spate irrigation areas, in Saliba agriculture, is mainly from the main riverbed. It's less from the flood channels or the fields. So if we want to recharge the groundwater, we really have to focus on the riverbed, particularly the gravelly sections of the riverbed. And also, the recharge is most effective if the spate flows are slow. If they rush, the recharge is limited. And in the flat sections, of course, the flow is slower and the recharge is higher. There's also recharge if we pond up water at bunds and weirs, and also if we block to some extent the subsurface base flow. Finally, also it's important to make sure that these floods, these spates, are spread over a large area, go to many areas to optimize recharge. So what do we do? Well, first is to keep the rough gravel bed intact. Not remove gravel. For instance, close to cities we have the tendency to remove gravel, but then the river doesn't have the ability to retain floods and to recharge. We can also consider low floats and bed stabilizers to slow down the flow. We can avoid excessive siltation in main recharge sections by sort of clever engineering, and we should make sure that we do not block the subsurface flow through cut-off weirs or bed stabilizers. This is unfortunately happened in several areas. This is an example not from Balochistan but from Yemen, but this is sort of mirror image Yemen with Balochistan in many respects. Here a weir was created. It was built. It was a cut-off weir. It was built on the bedrock, and as a result, all the wells downstream of this weir dried up. This is not what we want to do. Of course, the wells upstream, they sort of were full of water, but you created a massive imbalance in the downstream and upstream groundwater table. So this is really something that is not a good idea. What's a good idea, for instance, in the same area is to sometimes spread the water distribution so that also more floods are going downstream and they can recharge the floods there as well. This often is as important as the water for irrigation. If wells downstream are no longer recharged, people lose their major source of livelihood. An example, a traditional example, what people have been doing to recharge groundwater is to build these very low weirs. The main function of this weir in this particular river is just to slow down the speed of the flood and spread them, so that you have much more recharge from the floods, and hence your groundwater tables are being replenished. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is that we can do much better in developing groundwater resources in dry riverbeds. So I mentioned first the better use, the promotion of spate irrigation, expansion of spate irrigation, making use of its potential, but also with a clear eye to what it can do for groundwater recharge. This is the other thing, we can develop much better groundwater resources in dry riverbeds. And I want to show you two techniques which are common in other parts of the world, successful, but virtually, in my understanding, unknown in Balochistan. This was 20 years ago, and this is still the current situation. One are sand dams. Just a few images. A sand dam is basically a very small weir dam, and what it does is not diverting water, it's trapping sand behind its body, and this sand, what you can see also here, it will retain flood water, and this will actually be a source of water both in the riverbed and in the areas adjacent to it. It's a very common technique. It's quite robust, if you do it properly, and the water which is being stored in the sand also doesn't have the same problems with evapotranspiration losses as we have elsewhere. This is another sand dam, and here actually what was done was pipes were built into the dam body, into the sand layer behind it, and this was feeding drinking water systems. This picture is from Kenya, by the way. Now also, I already mentioned we have to make use of road infrastructure. Often roads also function as a sand dam, so if we're more clever, we make the roads, for instance, without culverts, these road crossings, then we can also create, particularly in rivers which are gravelly or sandy, we can create small water resources upstream of the road. I think this is a sort of no-brainer. It doesn't cost much, but it just requires a little bit of clever thinking. I mentioned sand dams. So sand dams basically trap sand behind their body, and then that body retains water which can be used for so many different sources. We can also think of subsurface dams. You don't see them on the surface, of course. They are basically man-made small barriers in the riverbed, which block the underground flow of water and raise the water level in the sand and retain more water in the riverbed and in the land adjacent to it. They can be extremely low cost. They can be made of clay, for instance, which is then reburied into the gravel of the riverbed, and they're quite robust because they're not flown to any damage because they're underneath the gravel in the riverbed. Very simple technique, can be highly effective to develop more groundwater resources in Balochistan. So I think an agenda for action should be short. For me, there would be really two major points that have to be considered in Balochistan, and it should get started. First is what the examples I gave in the first part of the presentation. We should regulate groundwater use by activating the communities in managing their groundwater, by making them understand, by making them measure, by making them plan how to use the groundwater resources. I think Balochistan has an excellent tradition of extremely forceful community action. We have the Courageous, we have so many examples of this. It was a pleasure for me all the years I worked in Balochistan to see that sturdiness and that enormous strength. And so if we bring in groundwater management, this can be done. This is also happening in other countries. I mentioned Yemen. There's many examples where people have made their own rules. No well here, no well deeper than this. This is a recharge zone. No water demanding crops. So all those sort of rules can be promoted through communities. And I think even the Balochistan Groundwater Management Ordinance, which was formulated way back, has the good basis for this. The second thing is to use all the best techniques to systematically recharge groundwater. I gave the example from Ethiopia where they use so many different techniques. I'm really horrified to see in Balochistan still after all those years, we still focus too much on a few not so effective techniques like the delay action dams. Apologies if I insult people, but I think we have a big palette, a big range of opportunities that we can use to manage and recharge groundwater, and we should do that. And one of them, really important, because that's where a large number of the flood flows go, is the systematic development of spate irrigation through sand dams, through subsurface dams, to better to low weirs in the riverbed, we can really recharge the groundwater much more than we can do. And I think this can help us move away from the disaster that I think is now on our hand. Again, I appreciate so much that this meeting is organized. I really feel honored to be able to be part of it, although it's from a distance. And I really want to greet all the dear good friends in Balochistan that are still in my heart, but unfortunately I can't meet today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.